Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney from London in the UploadVR studios as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today with last generation Meta avatars. We've got hand tracking and built-in microphones. We've got tablets in front of us that show us notes and comments so we can interact with our audience when we're live. And thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time watching us, you can become a paying member at UploadVR.com to support our work directly. We thank our patrons by name here on this podcast, and they're listed on our website as well. Sincerely, thank you to our patrons, including XR Developer News, Podum the Developer, Smashdrums, Holonet, Mike Manzano, Justin Corcoran at Phosphor Studios, Richard Meller, Parmesan Qubits, and Steve Lucas. I just wrote about his work last week with Jigsaw Night. Hello to our audience. I see F Meister out there. Let us know where you're watching us from. If you're time traveling, catching us up, we'll see you in the future. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. Hello, Anakazi and F Meister there in the comments. Good to see you all. Black Market Honey, good to see you as well from sunny Sweden. We have 10 topics we're going to discuss today. We'll start with the South Korean news report that claims Samsung's headset will ship in October, but to South Korea first. Very interesting report there that suggests a much more limited launch than some may have hoped for Android XR. Then we'll discuss Meta adding the ability for WebXR apps that are packaged onto the Meta Horizon store to use in-app payments, making it easier for web developers to monetize in a limited scope. Then Ian will discuss how the ModRetro Chromatic handheld now displays Nintendo Game Boy games in a Quest headset. So you can, instead of being limited to that small screen, still use the physical controls, but play those Game Boy games on a massive virtual screen. Then Ian will run you through how Alcoholics Anonymous meetings are being held every day in virtual spaces, a good example of the positive power of social VR. That will be followed by 2 smart glasses news stories. Firstly, we will discuss the Oakley Meta HSTN glasses, or Houston glasses, I think they're actually called, which have been announced as essentially like a Ray-Ban Meta Pro. It's very similar device to the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, but with a different design and more battery life, as well as the ability to capture 3K video up from 1080p. Then we will discuss Google reportedly investing in Gentle Monster, one of EssilorLuxottica's competitors, as part of its plan to take on Ray-Ban Meta. Google wants Gemini on your glasses, not Meta AI, and we expect this space to really heat up and be a massive competitive space in 2026. Then we will discuss an interesting experiment for the Snap Spectacles AR Glasses Dev Kit. A developer there built a real-world ad blocker. So you're walking around your world and the billboards get covered up with a red rectangle. The ads on the newspaper, even the Coke can that you pick up, the Coca-Cola symbol gets covered. And that opens up all kinds of questions about what these platforms will allow, what we might be able to do to the real world with AR glasses, and also some technical hard realities about how limited that would be through transparent, see-through AR display systems. We then have 2 stories about immersive and volumetric video. Firstly, Apple's F1 movie. It's just out tomorrow in the US and yesterday internationally. Their big summer blockbuster from Apple in cinemas. They have a 3-minute immersive teaser on Apple Vision Pro for it. And we'll talk about how that actually shows the limitations of these relatively bulky immersive video cameras and why you actually need a more portable setup and why they had to compromise on quality for the first time. So this is actually a lower quality immersive video than any of Apple's immersive content so far, but it's a 3-minute teaser. So I think they thought it acceptable to be able to put a camera beside Brad Pitt in the F1 car to have lower quality. Then we will talk about something that our audience has been asking about for a very long time. Fixed off volumetric video. So somewhat like immersive video, but you can actually lean around, and instead of the whole world being fixed to your head, you're actually leaning through the scene. Thanks to Gaussian splatting, we're now seeing that become a reality. Gaussian splatting, of course, as we've discussed many times in the show, has enabled the kind of scan a real world space with your phone and see it in VR use case, but we've started to see in recent months some real progress being made on how do we do this for moving scenes? How do we capture volumetric video and actually efficiently be able to send it across the internet and have your headset render it? Still early days, but it's no longer one of those things where we'll say, oh, this is the 2030s. There is real practical software engineering being done on this problem right now. Finally, we will discuss the Quest 3S Xbox Limited Edition. Teased just over a year ago, finally available, but only in limited quantities, I should say. And as Meta makes it very clear, this is a limited edition. So once the stock is gone, it's gone. According to Meta, they will not be bringing it back. So if you want it, now would be the time to get it. We'll discuss what exactly it is, what it means for the industry, and what it doesn't mean. So those are our topics for today. I see a lot of people have flooded into the chat since we started talking here. Shackman, Denver, Miller, good to see you all. I'm seeing Norway, Germany, Utah. Great to see. And yes, Simon says from Norway is complaining that the Xbox Quest is in the US and UK only, which I'm sure is frustrating for people outside our two countries who do want that.
Yeah, and I'm doing the math on the one I purchased on whether I can earn back my debt on going to debt to buy the thing, just so I could own the on payment plan the Xbox 3S. But we'll talk about that later in the show. We've got a lot to talk about before that. I love the people catching up, and I like Shackman making dinner out there as they're listening to us. Always love everyone listening to us whenever they can, squeezing us into their day. I find that I find VR is very similar to that in a sense, right? You find kind of squeeze VR into your day whenever you can. I was at the Apple store last night at 1 a.m. to send off my Apple Vision Pro because it had a hairline crack on the external surface, and the Apple technician very kindly wrote that it appears to be just a hairline fracture. So I got a $0 estimate on how much that's going to cost me to repair, because apparently it's just something that they acknowledge happens to the headsets rather than my damage. It would be a Quest 3S cost, though, to fix that glass if they decide that it was my fault and it was an impact. So yeah, that was 1 a.m. at the Apple store in New York, the only 24-hour Apple store that I know of. And it was quite an experience to take my VR headset in for a replacement. But that was how I could squeeze in the time for VR last night.
I'll be very interested to see what material the next Apple Vision headset has on the front, and whether they go for the same kind of level of fragility in the name of aesthetics. It'll be interesting to see for sure. Let's get into our first topic then. So Samsung's headset. It was formally announced back in December after years of Samsung saying it was working on a headset, with Google doing the software and Qualcomm providing the chip. We now know that this will be the debut of Google's Android XR platform. Samsung gets to be first, as it worked so closely with Google. But the question we still have always been asking is, when is this thing actually going to launch? What will the price be? What's it called? All it's been called so far is Project Muhan. It hasn't been given a real product name yet. We still don't know the answer to those questions, but we do have a report from the South Korean news outlet Newspim, which claims that it will happen in October, the launch. Late September will be when pre-orders are opened, and then in October it will actually ship. But according to this report, it will launch in South Korea first and then have a gradual global rollout. So if you're in the West, if you're not in South Korea, it may be possible, if this report is correct, that you actually won't be able to get Android XR at launch, that South Korea will be the first country in the world to get Android XR. And in some senses, that makes sense, right? This is a Samsung product. Samsung is obviously a South Korean company. At the same time, they are also using expensive and limited quantity 4K micro OLED displays. The same reason Apple Vision Pro is so expensive. Vision Pro launched in the US first and then went worldwide. But I think this is going to be It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very kind of anticlimactic for a lot of people who have been really hoping for Android XR to come in here and liven up this space if this is a headset that's only launching in South Korea. And I also suspect that if they are this limited in quantity, we're going to see quite a steep price. I saw a discussion earlier in the week where some people were kind of hoping, oh, maybe this will be $800 or $600. I think that's vastly underestimating what we're going to see here. I would love to be wrong about this because I'd love to see obviously a vibrant competition for standalone 4K micro OLED displays, but I think we're going to see this thing at $2,000 at the minimum. I don't think below 2,000 is on the tables here.
It's rough. I've been thinking about this a long time. So we're due to get more info here. There'll be a real name to this thing, an actual product that people can, I don't know, call out names of, Samsung Gear VR, Samsung Odyssey, Samsung Odyssey Plus. Those were actual product names that we all talk about years later. And what are they going to call this thing is we've been wondering for a while here. I'm worried about Android XR being too much being expected of Android XR out of the gate in this first headset, right? Like Android isn't known for kind of having a one device that does it all type ecosystem. You have a bunch of different devices that all excel at different categories of things, and that's kind of the beauty of the whole Android idea. And I don't know, people are kind of hoping for a silver bullet of some kind to answer what Apple has done with the Vision Pro, and I don't know if that's what they're going to get here.
Yeah, I think it's quite clear that this is going to be a very gradual process. Google, of course, hopes that over time there will be lots of different Android XR headsets, different price points, different form factors. We've seen X-Rail's Project Aura, which is likely launching in 2026. They haven't said, but it's likely, especially given that Samsung has exclusivity. But there haven't been any company that I'm aware of that has come out and said, we're going to build a Quest-priced Android XR headset. So, if your hope here is that you'll get an Android equivalent to Apple Vision Pro, I think more or less that's probably what's going to happen eventually here, especially once this is worldwide. But if your hope here is that like Google is going to swing in out of the clouds and smash Meta out of the market, that's not going to happen initially, at least. And whether it happens eventually is of course anyone's guess, but it's definitely not going to happen in the initial wave of Android XR.
Yeah, we should probably move on pretty quickly to the next one, but I'm seeing a lot of conversation, so we'll want to talk about Headsets Historian and everyone else just talking about this. What in the larger context, what I just want to think about is it feels like Android XR first needs to get gaming in VR right, in the same way that Apple still hasn't, right? It's only this summer and not even yet that we have an Apple Vision Pro headset that will be compatible with tracked hand controllers. So almost a year and a half, more than a year and a half into the life cycle of this product, the Apple Vision Pro, there's no tracked hand controllers. You have to make games that only work for hand tracking or gaze pinch. Now you've got gamepad games starting to emerge. I just played an AR helicopters game that was really interesting. I need to write about. But like, it's taking what I'm getting at here is it's taking time, lots of time, for Apple to actually build out a gaming offering on its operating system. There's no professional ecosystem at all on Apple's operating system. People aren't actually doing real work with it. It's still that luxury device that we only saw in that initial ad where the person was on the flight with the big screen television. Yes, you've got a bunch of little things added to that, but it's still very much that theater experience with some games starting to come, and it's been out for nearly 2 years going into February. And Android is only starting out now on a journey that's going to take years to build out even one of those use cases for Android XR. And which of those use cases are they going to kind of like knock it out of the park in South Korea in the next year? That's
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would add to what you're saying about Vision Pro is Mac Virtual Display. There are people doing real work on Vision Pro, but not in Vision OS. Some people, I guess, are, but on a wide scale, it's in Mac Virtual Display. It's that ability to turn your MacBook into this gigantic virtual monitor setup. And of course, Google doesn't have its own desktop OS. Sure, there's Chrome OS, but you're not getting any more power than you would out of Android in the first place. So it'll be interesting to see what their focus is here. And as with Apple, they will be monitoring in these first months, what do the early adopters do with it? What do developers do with it? And it will be, as you say, the first 2 years or so of this platform will be about building out the initial use cases, understanding the market, seeing what do people use, what do they not use, how's the retention, how's the sales, all of these things. And then the future product strategies can be built on that. And we can all criticize Meta's handling of various strategy over the past decade, but the one big advantage Meta has, or at least one big advantage Meta has, I should say, is that they have a decade of data of how people are using these headsets. They have millions of headsets out there and they're seeing how they're being used, albeit how headsets with a limited resolution and limited performance are being used. But that at least lets them kind of inform their decisions here.
I love that. I love that. I also wonder if that is an unexpected problem for Meta leadership. We've tried that already, is something they could have said 5 years ago about almost every idea in VR, right? Yep. And so like here we are 10 years into their VR journey, and you've got an executive leadership team that feels like they've already tried everything twice and failed at it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It does have the issue that there were many things that Meta was trying 10 years ago that Apple Vision Pro came out and did really, really well. And Meta must have been slightly surprised by, oh, so it actually turns out if you have the quality level, if the resolution is high enough, if the polish is good enough, if the software is good enough, people do use headsets for this. Like, as we've said, when we put out our Vision Pro review, when it came out, Meta was doing, renting 3D movies back in the Gear VR and Oculus Go days. The hardware just wasn't good enough. So of course there are
with friends. I loved it. They had friends, right? You get friends with your ticket back when they had that story. Yep. It was the right model, right? They were thinking along the right lines, and it just withered away. How many companies has the person who built that jumped to since they actually built that, right? They're on their fourth or fifth Silicon Valley company by now. That's the way Silicon Valley works. I could be wrong on that. That person could still be at Meta doing, the good fight for Meta. I'm just being jokey here, but
I'd say it's most likely they're not. But I mean, I guess we could summarize this by saying Meta has a lot of data about what works in the low end of the market with low end hardware, but they don't yet have data about the high end. And Quest Pro was not high end. It was high priced. It was not a high end device. It had no more computing power than a Quest 2 and pretty much the same resolution, a tiny bit more. Like, it was not a truly high-end device. Next year with Meta's ultralight headset with a compute puck, they will actually start to gain data, and interestingly it'll be around the same time as this kind of Android XR experience. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what this market looks like once we do get to a place where you have the Horizon OS platform across Quest headsets and whatever they call the higher end thing next year, in addition to potentially, Asus and Lenovo, and then Android XR with Samsung, with XReal, with whoever else is there. Lynx has indicated they want to be. Play for Dream wants to be. Lynx at least has had Google include them in a, Android XR slide, whereas Play for Dream is still in talks. And then, of course, Apple Vision is that third platform where Apple's providing the hardware and the software entirely. It'll be interesting to see. There's one comment here I want to bring up from MemeFan, just for clarity, that says Quest is Android. And that's an example of something that is entirely technically true, but practically there is an important difference, right? So yes, Meta's Horizon OS is based on AOSP, the Android Open Source Project core. The core of these OSs between this headset and your Quest headset is the same. Absolutely. And that means you can sideload certain Android applications between them and they all work. On a technical level, sure. But on a practical platform and user level, when you get a Quest headset, you make a Meta account and you acquire your content on the Meta Horizon store, and the tracking software on your headset is from Meta and the controllers are from Meta. Whereas on this headset, you make a Google account and you access the Google Play Store, and all your tracking software is from Google and your platform services are from Google. that's what matters to the actual buyer. If you were a buyer who didn't know anything about technology, you wouldn't know that these headsets run the same core operating system. But it is confusing to talk about, right? Because technically, Quest is an Android XR headset, but it's not an Android XR headset. And that's almost silly to say, but it is an important point to point out, in fact. And it's a situation we've been in for a while now, and it's not just Quest, right? Technically, Pico, it's an Android XR headset in that it's an XR headset that runs an OS based on Android. Same with Quest, but it's not an Android XR TM headset. So there will be some confusion around that from people who are very kind of interested in the technical correctness of this. But I think, the average user will just see, Meta Horizon OS, Quest, Android XR, Google, and understand that these are different things.
Yeah, and I think we'll have to talk about our buying recommendations at this point in the market. I guess I'll just spark that idea out there into the conversation of how would you talk to a person who hears what's coming, or they're like, oh hey, I know you're the VR person. What is going on in VR? What should I buy? Like you actually got a friend who comes up to you in the next 4 to 5 months and says, okay, I'm ready. What do I get? What do you tell them? What is the story? How do you explain this to them? I'm just genuinely curious to read how you would address that conversation, because we're in such a complicated time where we're all, as longtime fans of this technology and like the things it provides us, it's not a great time to go out with your $400. That's, your last $400 and drop it on something.
I don't know if I'd agree. I don't know if I'd agree with that. I don't see what other hardware at that price do you see coming? We just discussed how this thing is going to be thousands of dollars.
We'll get to that later. Yeah, we'll do that when we get to the, but let's do the WebXR story now.
Yeah, no, I mean, you just brought that up. I just said, to me right now, for $300, if that's all you can afford, get a Quest 3S. For $500, get a Quest 3. There's nothing else that I can see coming at that price point. Valve is the only kind of mystery box here where Deckard could be anything. Rumors suggest around 1,000 or 1,200 or something like that, but you don't know with Valve. They could come out of nowhere. But the thing about Valve also is it's impossible to know when they're really going to launch, right? The rumor mill has moved to 2026 for Valve Deckard. That's what people are suggesting. So, we're only in June now. There's still like 6 months left of the year. There was a point where, Quest 3S was around the corner, or even when Quest 3 was around the corner, when we were saying, don't buy Quest 2. I don't think that's the case right now for Quest 3. I still think Quest 3 is a great purchase right now.
Okay, we'll get to the Xbox section. Let's do the WebXR story. I'm ready to fight you on that. And if you want to predict what my fight's going to be, I'll read it in the comments while we get to that section. So it'll be fun.
I mean, I'm very interested to hear what your kind of counter argument to that is. So we'll definitely get into it when we get into it. But let's get through these smaller news stories first. So WebXR apps on Quest's Meta Horizon store can now use in-app payments. So what's the story here? WebXR is a web technology. It lets you develop immersive AR and VR applications that hosted on a website. You can host it on your own server in your basement, or you can host it on a cloud platform. It's the same as the web. WebXR. People access it on standalone headsets, the web browser built into the headset. On PC VR, you can just use Google Chrome and it'll interface with whatever your OpenXR runtime that is, be that virtual desktop or Steam VR or Quest Link. So any headset, in theory, can access WebXR experiences. It is kind of the most open development path in the industry when you think about it. One issue with WebXR, though, is monetizing. So if you are targeting something like Apple Vision Pro on Safari, targeting isn't the right word, but let's just say if your user is using that, you can do in-app payments through Apple Pay because Safari has Apple Pay. On Android XR, with the Samsung headset, you should in theory be able to do it with Google Pay. These are frictionless payment systems where instead of having to go and grab your credit card and awkwardly type in the numbers on a virtual keyboard and trust that individual developer with your details, you can just use the platform level payments. And much of the web has been taken over by Google and Apple Pay because of this. The same way that PayPal kind of acted as an earlier version of this for many people. And the issue is that, of course, the Quest's browser, Horizon OS's web browser, doesn't actually support any kind of frictionless payment system like that. So if you did want to build a WebXR experience, the vast majority of your users are going to be on Quest headsets. Every WebXR developer I've ever spoken to has said that, and it makes sense, right? There are millions of Quest headsets out there. They have a web browser built in. People go on the web browser and play around with WebXR. If monetizing that until now has been relatively impossible. Again, you could do the typing in with a virtual keyboard and, looking at your credit card through either the pass-through or under the facial interface, but good luck converting anyone through that. So at MetaConnect 2024, Meta has started to allow WebXR apps to be packaged as progressive web apps and put on the Meta Horizon store. As you can see in this image on screen, this has been a thing since MetaConnect, right? You can put it on the Horizon store, and to the user, it will feel like any other app if you've made it well enough. They won't know that you built it in WebXR, just like they won't know what game engine you used unless they're technically savvy and can see the default shaders or whatever, right? The typical average user wouldn't know what your development technology was on the store. But until now, you couldn't monetize through this either. So there wasn't really any advantage to it other than just discoverability, right? You get listed on the store. Now what Meta has done is implemented the Digital Goods API, which is a new web standard for progressive web apps on app stores packaged, being able to use the in-app payment system of an app store. You probably know what in-app payments are. If you used an iPhone or an Android phone or even a games console where you're inside the app and there's a prompt to purchase something and a system interface pops up where you're using your payment system that you've already set up with the actual app store itself. That's what this is. So this is letting WebXR apps packaged onto the Horizon store use the same in-app payment system that native apps have access to. So if you did build a WebXR experience and you did want to get some level of monetization out of it, this could be a path that you want to take. Obviously, this wouldn't mean that you take it off the open web, right? You would still want to have your app on the open web, either with no monetization or with the kind of type your credit card details in. But this is just another place to put your WebXR experience.
Yeah, I am deeply curious about the people who aren't in VR yet or aren't developing for VR yet and the reasons why they aren't making for VR. We understand cross-platform development is incredibly difficult or has been in the past for WebXR. It's really, really, really hard to make a single web-based VR experience that looks the same on both headsets. And then you look out there and you've got the Snapchat Spectacles that is also saying that they're going to be compliant with this sort of technology that's going to display the same kind of content in it's going to feel completely different because of the field of view of the devices being so different and the content being see-through. Where we had this discussion before we got in here, and I struggle with web devs. They plan their products over the course of decades. Like they really want their stuff to last over the long term. And it's remarkable, David, how much of Meta's stuff around me has deprecated into disuse just by they've updated the software a whole bunch past the release, and now a whole bunch of their stuff doesn't work anymore. That's one example, one small example among a very large treasure trove of data that many devs have out there of being burned by Meta's tool making in one way, shape, or form over the years. They don't want to depend on Meta's tools to make a website, even though historically Meta has helped so many in doing so, right? There's a lot of web devs out there who have just why do I need Meta? Why do I need to package my software up? Because while today this is a big option, a great option, when Meta has 80% market share and now they are changing the way their APIs work, what happens to your WebXR experience that's running on a different platform using Meta tools from, that's what I'm trying, that's the discussion I was trying to have with you about this, and what I'm trying to have with our audience, and trying to like break this down. Why would people want to have their entitlements inside Meta's ecosystem, their websites using Meta's tools, and those things
Sure.
tracking them when they're on other devices that aren't Meta's?
Sure. So this doesn't involve using Meta's tools to build a website. You would keep your same WebXR site on the open web, available through any web browser. And this is just another place to access that, where it's the same exact WebXR app, but packaged into an APK and put on the store. That's all it is. So there's actually no Meta tool being used here. The Digital Goods API is an open standard, so it can be used for other app stores as well. You can use the same APK and put it on the Pico store if they allow
So
packaged WebXR apps. There's no Meta specific tool actually being used here. But the fact you're putting on the store. It's like if you sell your newspaper, or I don't know, you sell your, I don't know, let's say you sell your hot dog in the street, and then a business cafe says you can sell your hot dog in my cafe too. Like it's somewhere else to sell the hot dog. The hot dog's still available in your stand on the street,
there's so many things. There's a combination of so many different technologies when you start talking about, like, I've got a quarter in my hand and I want to put it into the newspaper stand and pull out a newspaper. And the thing is, I don't want I talked about a quarter that has no tracking on it, right? There's no tracking value on the quarter because it's a physical quarter that, you put in a machine. And there's also no tracking on me grabbing the newspaper and my identity being attached to pulling the newspaper out of the newspaper stand. All of that changes in certain instances, like, for instance, the like button tracking your activity off of websites, even though you're not logged in necessarily to the site.
Sure. So to make a payment online, other than through cryptocurrency, the specific cryptocurrencies that are designed to be anonymous, or where you use your own wallet, you're using someone's payment service, right? So if you're doing an in-app payment, say you made a WebXR experience entirely meant for Vision Pro, and you don't care about any other headset. Theoretically, it runs on other headsets, but you don't care, and you put an Apple Pay button in there to be able to unlock a certain aspect of it. You're still using Apple Pay, right? You're using Apple's payment system. There's no real digital equivalent that I can think of other than, like I said, specific cryptocurrencies that are designed to be entirely anonymous, using your own wallet, that wouldn't involve using somebody's payment system at some point. There is no equivalent of that today. But to be clear, what developers want eventually, and I said this in our article, what web developers really want is to be able to do these in-app payments on the open web, right? They want you to be able to do it in the web browser. And as people are pointing out, there is a web payments API. And if you use that web payments API on Chrome, you will launch, the Google Chrome payment system, which is on Android heavily integrated with Google Pay. On Apple's device, I'm pretty sure that will trigger through Apple Pay on the web, right? Apple Pay on the web through the Web Payments API. The issue is that Meta doesn't implement the Web Payments API. Ideally, what you would want then is for Meta to do so, but it would still be going through your Meta account, your Meta payment system, right? That's how it works. When you request a web payment, it goes through your browser platform holder's payment system.
Sure, but then an entitlement gets generated and put somewhere, right, to say that you have access to the thing you just paid for, and that's a different system.
Sure,
but it ends up being related, and as soon as
you can do that. Sorry, just to be clear, it is a different system, and that's very important. So to do that on the web, you do that with your own account system, or you can use someone else's account system if you want. You can use sign in with Google, sign in with Apple. But I agree. Look, I agree with you, Ian, on the fact that what we want here is the Horizon browser, the Horizon OS web browser, to support the Web Payments API, and then the developer can do the entitlement themselves. That's definitely something we want.
This is a very circular thing, and it's going to get so many people fired up. But imagine, like, you've got WebKit and all these core foundational technologies for everything we do on the web, and the only way it rolls out, the only way the web rolls forward, is by these companies playing like a chess match with web layers and web technologies that push they push each other forward. And the thing that's been mind-numbingly frustrating for years is the restriction on companies like Big Screen unable to take 100% of the revenue for their movie purchase.
Yeah.
And unable to do a whole movie store business on the platform. And here you're going, Meta's opening up the gates for that. Like they've shown a path to do that.
Well, they haven't, right? So that this runs into that same problem. This is still the same in-app payment system that Big Screen was using. It's just a different development technology for it. So Meta would still take the 30% cut from this. That's why I'm saying, and actually why I think we're very much so in agreement, actually, that what we do want is the web browser to do it, because typically they take a smaller cut on these web payments because it's more like being a payment processor. I'm not actually sure exactly what the Apple Pay and Google Pay cut is on the web. I think it's a couple of percent. It's nowhere near 30%. It's on the order of somewhere between like 2 and 5%. So that would be a business that the Big Screen would be able to build out of.
I had an image of, I was trying to imagine how all this stuff is going to work in the future, and I had an image in my head of like an object you pull out to make your purchases. Like, this is my sales object, and like that you keep it on a little secret. It's your credit card, but it's whatever object you pick, and right, you stick in whatever. I don't know. We want this all to work in the future, and they're still designing it right now. I don't want to have to scan a QR code to log into every single website I use for the rest of all time. And I don't want to enter my credit card details either.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know how this is going to work.
I mean, that runs into, again, the question Recycle just asked. Couldn't you just not be able to buy stuff if you're anonymous, log in and link your payment info? So yeah, like we said at the start of this discussion, nothing today is stopping a developer from just doing their own payment system or using Stripe or whatever. But the friction of when being inside your headset, going and picking up your credit card and reading the numbers through pass-through, depending on what headset you're using, remember that there's still millions and millions of people out there on Quest 2. That's going to be a rough experience. Or you're kind of awkwardly lifting up your headset to look down at a credit card, then reaching over to the virtual keyboard and pressing it. It's horribly frictionful. It's when it comes to like payment systems, whether it be inside an app or on the web, friction matters. If you can hit, your Face ID or your Touch ID and Apple Pay something, the conversion rate, which is what developers call it in e-commerce, how many people actually go from looking at your product offering to buying it, is a lot higher than if they have to go and type in things themselves. Of course, on a traditional device like a computer or a phone, it isn't that big of a deal to do this. You've got perfect natural vision. You're not looking through pass-through. You can type on a keyboard that is a lot more efficient than these virtual floating keyboards. It's just in VR, the unique combination of kind of being isolated from real-world objects plus typing sucking is why the friction matters even more here.
And we need to move on, but an analogy just came to my head that I'm going to have to just get out of my head. Right? Imagine you're getting on a highway, and you get airdropped a whole bunch. Your car is driving along the highway; it's working fine, 60 miles an hour, and while you're driving along, you get airdropped from drones a whole bunch of new features for your car. You get a machine gun attached to the side, laser guidance, all these things get attached. You're a transformer getting stronger as you're driving down the road, right? And it feels amazing to have all these new features dropped in on your car from the sky, right? But now you want to get off the highway and go back to your neighborhood, right? And the car is bigger than it was when it got on the highway and can't fit through the tunnel to get off the freeway anymore. This is the analogy in my mind for how technologies tend to like stop you from being able to leave the ecosystem once you buy into it to begin with. And that's all this I wanted to like discuss today when we talk about why you would wrap a WebXR experience and put it on a storefront. It doesn't compute for me.
Yeah, I mean, for a developer, it's just an extra bit of money. I understand you completely, though. Like fundamentally, you would want it to be on the open web, but I guess in some sense, this applies to all app stores, right? When you buy a DLC in Walkabout Mini Golf on your Quest headset, that DLC is only available on Quest. If you go and get an Android XR headset 18 months from now and crack out Walkabout Mini Golf, your DLC is not going to be there.
You nailed it. We're talking about the same thing, right? There is the entire audience of people who are interested in VR headsets want to purchase that Walkabout Mini Golf course collection once and own it for all time. But that's not the way video games are made. That's not how live service things are done. You have to constantly provide upkeep on the servers and put money back into it to keep it going. I mean, and so they're funding it by buying the courses again and again and again, or you're like.
Look, one thing I would say is I think if there was a way for Walkabout Mini Golf to let you buy it on all headsets, they would. The problem is that that's not what these app stores allow, right? Apple's just been through a billion court arguments for this. The whole point is that these companies want you to only be able to use their payment system, and Apple is now kind of being forced to allow other payment systems.
How do we have two entitlement repositories that we can go grab from at any time without needing to log in every single time? Because that we're all talking about the same darn thing. So there was a time when I had two app stores installed on my Gear VR phone. And look at where we are today. I probably couldn't even get that device turned on if I wanted to. Like I couldn't get either of them in VR. That's the type of rot that can happen with a poorly architected system here.
Sure, yeah. And I think the thing is this just applies to all app stores, right? If PlayStation went bust tomorrow and said we're not making a PlayStation 6, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just giving a random hypothetical. You would be forced to, when the next gen of consoles come out, go and get a Nintendo Switch 3 and go and buy all your stuff again on Nintendo, right? Like the same way if Nintendo went bust and said, we're never making another console, you would have to go and buy all your stuff on PlayStation 6. It's like, what do you mean? That's, of course it is. If
no. Let me just respond to James's thing. I'm complaining about profit-oriented capitalism. Kind of. No, if you go and buy a game, you can go buy some games on GOG.com, right? And you can go download the installer package for the game directly from the website and then put that on a USB drive, and it's yours for time. For, like hand that down to your great grandchildren. It's there on the thumb drive, right? Like it's up to you to decide whether that data survives the stand of time. Now, are you still going to be able to log into your Steam account? Are your children going to be able to log into your Steam account in the year 2050?
Yeah, physical media is a trade-off that allows you to do this kind of non-account based system, right? I think, that's not a trade-off most people are willing to make, because you lose that thumb drive and you've just lost potentially thousands of dollars of games if you were buying all of your games like this. So the other thing is, of course, then you have to plug that into every new device, right? It's not like when you buy a new headset or a new Switch. When you buy the Switch 2, all of your Switch 1 games are there as soon as you log in, and you just download them all from the eShop. And same thing when you go from a PS4 to a PS5 or whatever. Sure, you could do that through physical media. I think when it comes to like a VR headset, the idea of like having it on a physical drive that's attached into your headset that you then go to the other things. The problem is also then, how do you do updates? How do you do updates in that system? Every time the developer releases an update, how's it getting to you? Are you going onto the web and downloading the update manually each time?
Do you remember? Back in my day, children, people used to make game art and then release it and then move on to the next game art. Right? They didn't update the game art on a day one patch, and then on a week one patch, and then a week two patch, and then actually release a game and reveal on the launch day that there's a secret part 2 to the game that actually is a year away. Like that's what I mean. All right, we need to move on.
It's an interesting discussion. Yeah. It is. I don't think it's like inherent to. I think it is inherent to app stores. Like theoretically a solution that a lot of people have been wanting now, and you're starting to see happen, with Apple in Europe and on Android already has been a thing for Android phones, is multiple app stores. So you can have the Google Play Store, but you could also have another app store from someone else. You can have the Apple App Store. You could also have Alt Store or whatever. But it's kind of just throwing the problem a little bit down the line. And sure, you could imagine a company that is only an app store company that is available on other platforms. It's, as James O'Loughlin said, it's a massive can of worms, and we could talk about this all day. It's super interesting stuff, though. I want to hear you talk about your experience with ModRetro, the Game Boy handheld. That's our next topic, because it now can display Nintendo Game Boy games directly in your Quest. And as far as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, that's without a capture card. So you just use a USB-C cable, plug this into the side of your Quest headset, and you will then be able to use physical controls for a Game Boy while seeing the output on a massive virtual screen that you can position wherever you want, as big as you want. Am I wrong, Ian, or is that what you've been experiencing this week?
Yeah, I just decided to play Super Mario Land on the Game Boy while I'm here, and all I did to do that was I unplugged the power cord that I had plugged into a battery pack. I was at 24%. I was at like 15% when I joined us today, and I got us up to 24%, and I unplugged that from the battery pack, plugged this just standard USB-C cable I have around the house back into the ModRetro Chromatic, and here I am. I'm playing Game Boy inside the UploadVR studios on a nice virtual screen. It's fantastic. It even auto prompted me to start streaming the moment I plugged it in to the handheld game system. So just a beautiful flow. The app that popped up was the MetaQuest HDMI link. This is the app that we've written and talked about in the past, but it's kind of a misnomer, right? This is using the UVC output of the device to get me my low latency picture from the handheld. And yeah, the image you put up here, it's one of my, you've got one of the first images of my home office lab that is near complete. It'll never be complete because I'm constantly updating it. But one of the things I've been toying around with for at least the last year is Game Boy cameras. And the idea that like you actually don't need a 10 megapixel or 12 megapixel camera in order to get a selfie that's kind of fun. And my dream here eventually is to hook up a Game Boy camera almost directly, as directly as I can, to a headset. It's just because I think it would be so stupid and silly to have basically a webcam from the 1990s to use. But here it is, right? I've got a selfie cam that I took for our website using a Game Boy cartridge that came out in the 1990s inside the Chromatic, and then all I've got is a simple USB cord running straight into my Quest headset. I'm now at 21% battery, so I'm going to have to go back on the battery here in order to get us through the rest of the show. But just
playing Game Boy on the job.
Yeah, that's the dream. I do this job so I can play Game Boy on the job.
Yeah, as you say, MetaQuest HDMI link, which is what this feature is called, is very much so a misnomer, because how it works in reality is that you get this little USB capture card that you need to put between the HDMI or DisplayPort device. And that actually what it does is convert that signal, or should I say compress it down into the kind of signal that webcams use to display video on your PC, right? When you plug in a USB-C webcam, how that video gets to a virtual screen inside whatever software you're using on your PC, that same standard is how you get video into Quest headsets, by converting it. But this device, this ModRetro Chromatic, this really impressive kind of Game Boy revival that can play Game Boy cartridges, it outputs natively in that format, so that you can do this without the capture card. And so that's kind of led to this magical solution. So, you get one of these, and whatever your display device is, like a Quest, you can just directly plug it in. I think that's incredible. I'm not sure I'm the biggest fan of the low resolution selfies, but it definitely is a cool novelty.
I know. Well, this is a very deep dive place that you can go with the amount of things. There's people who have like SLR lenses hooked up to the Game Boy camera with all sorts of crazy solutions. It's a fun place to sort of mess
Sure.
around and hack together ideas. And the fact that it works this smoothly is one more tool for other people to mess with and start doing weird things with Game Boys and old technology.
I mean, my question is though, how are the actual games? How does it feel to use the physical controls to then play the games on a giant screen? How does that feel? Have you played
It's
much yet?
yes. So I've played Super Mario Land to completion, start to finish. It's like a 45-minute, hour-long game. When you go through all the levels, it's a phenomenal. It's my obsession with classic gaming. People are saying I'm stuck in the '90s. This is one of the first photos of my office. I love this. Do you see this cat on the wall? Um, that cat was 3D printed with a 3D printing pen using the Pencil app.
Oh,
I,
that's
I
cool.
I made that by hand, tracing things on my desk. And the only reason I had a desk in my office here is because I removed the physical display, that other article I needed to write about. But on my wall here is my demonstration of everything I'm doing. And I like the person saying that they're reporting me to Nintendo. All right, go ahead and report me to Nintendo for putting a Game Boy camera and still using it in the year 2025 as they intended it to be used the year that they sold it, right? Like, that's what's phenomenal about this whole space, right? Like, these are artifacts of history that are now like doing weird and interesting, neat things. Did you know that there's a Game Boy game that had a solar panel on it in order to identify when it is night for there to be a vampire mechanic in the video game?
Oh, that is very cool. I didn't know that.
Anyways, all right.
So,
This is neat, and it's just magic that it works. This is the best. You asked how did it feel? Latency feels amazing, and it's really hard for me to describe because the chromatic itself has incredible latency characteristics for playing these games. In
mhm.
the video that I put on the website for this, watch it and realize that I take a cartridge out of the system, I flip it over it so you can see it, I put a cartridge into the system, and the moment the cartridge like collides with the chromatic pins on the inside, the game comes up in VR. Like it's instantaneous how quickly this.
That's
And when
cool.
I say game comes up in VR, I'm on the start screen, right? I hit start and I'm playing. And you think about 30 years of progress in video games, we have lost that we have lost that instant on video gaming. And like I said, yeah, 45 minutes from start to finish of a Super Mario game. It's a delight.
Yeah, that's a really good point. For decades, there was definitely a massive regression in that, and only recently, with the newest consoles having solid state storage, I say newest, they've been out for like 5 years now. Are we actually seeing, load times get shorter again? But it's still not the same as just snapping in a cartridge and being in. There's definitely something lost since then. What this makes me want in general, I understand that the point of this is that it does play physical cartridges, but I'm going to go in my direction and say what this makes me want is a kind of universal game controller that's running one of those emulator boxes that plays a bunch of different consoles without a screen. I don't want a screen. I just want the bottom part of this so that I'm always using it on headset.
I love that, David, because on if you rotated our view 90 degrees, you'd have the X Arcade cabinet that I have right there, which is just the bottom half of the classic arcade. It's exactly what you're describing. The interesting thing that you're saying though there, David, that I have to respond to is, I'm gonna just for anyone else that's rolling their eyes out there over retro gaming and all, they've done those efforts. I've done that experience over the years. If you've done the 90s thing and you were a kid in that period and you've tried to buy a game, you buy an emulator system, you build your own RetroPie, and you're like, does it run Nintendo 64 games or whatever the system is that you want to run it? And like you talk to some friend, it's like, yeah, it runs decently. And their definition of decently is different than your definition of decently, right? Like you go and get the Raspberry Pi hooked up, you invest $100 in a card and in the whole case to be just right. You get the game up running, and you go to play Super Mario, and it feels, I don't know, 3% less not as good quality as it did on your Nintendo 64 back in the day. Just a 3% difference, right? And it feels a little sluggish, a little less good, right? That has not been my experience with a Chromatic. It has felt as good or better than I remember it to have felt to play some of these games. And so, like, yeah, going through an entire game from start to finish is actually feasible. And so, like, if you've done retro gaming before and you've had bad experiences on, like, your dream machine, like you just described, there's a good chance that whoever made that hardware didn't pay attention to, frame latencies of a single
Yeah.
frame mattering to the person who played that game on original hardware back in 1995.
This is Palmer Luckey's company, isn't it? If I'm remembering correctly, the
It is,
ModRetro
yes.
Chromatic. Yeah, I think people who know the kind of history of Palmer getting into virtual reality is that he originally was doing these kind of Game Boy mods before. So this is kind of coming full circle. And he was very active on the kind of, I think it was the ModRetro forums, if I'm correct. And then he purchased it. I could be getting these details wrong. This is just he easily remembering a news article from a few months ago. So it's very interesting to see this kind of come full circle for his interest. And then obviously as he kind of returned to XR in the past few months as well with
Did
his
you ever have a
Netherlands.
Game Boy back in the day? Did you ever have
I
a?
did, yes, I did.
I would be really curious to see you get your hands on a Chromatic and to compare the feel of the
You're
latency
selling it.
characteristics.
You're selling it pretty well.
Yeah.
I like the sound of what you're saying. Yeah,
Well, I
that
mean,
direct output is pretty cool.
like to be clear here, right? When Quest HDMI Link when the Chromatic debuted, and I tried Quest HDMI Link with the Chromatic and found that it did not work. I wrote to the person who was in charge of the HDMI Link project and said, please, 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 I want this. And he said basically the same thing to me that you just said. Oh God, you're making me want one. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It feels fantastic.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Let's talk about our next topic, which is also a story from you and one that you were following. Very, very interesting. And that next topic is Alcoholics Anonymous. So there are Alcoholics Anonymous meetings being held in virtual spaces every day. And from reading your article, I saw that includes Horizon Worlds, VR Chat, and Resonite. And I'm sure there are other kind of platforms experimenting with this. So why don't you tell us all about this? What did you learn, and what's the impact of these virtual spaces for people dealing with alcoholism?
Yeah, so if you're unfamiliar with Alcoholics Anonymous or how it works, it's it's an individually driven group service where you're kind of driven by your own need, and you find other people, a support group to help you. And I think in this screenshot, or the first screenshot you had, showed VR chat. I'm not sure which one this is. But I went to one of these spaces. I went to the Horizon World one, and they had it was a fascinating little architecture for this space. They had an area where like a gazebo, where you go into the gazebo and your audio changes such that no one outside the gazebo can hear you anymore. It's like localized little cone of silence area. So you can imagine a couple people at this event or this meeting going, "Hey, could I take you over for a private conversation?" And the two of you go into this gazebo area of this event, and there's 15 people over there having a more general discussion, and the two of you are having a private one-to-one one where you feel like not everyone else in this particular area is listening to you. Um, I talked to one of the organizers of these AA meetings in VR, and I learned a little bit about the culture or traditions of these meetings and how they form. And it's one of the things I learned about. They've got a very interesting reasoning around anonymity. And it's fascinating to think about the reasoning around why Alcoholics Anonymous exists. Like you go and read all their literature, and they've got a whole bunch of explanations for why they do things, but they've got a very simple, little explanation that anonymity is the reason why we're able to put people on a path to recovery for their problems. They only come to these meetings because they have an assurance from just, appearing at the event that the people in attendance are going to respect your wishes to not be named or not have your problem associated with who you are outside of the bounds of this meeting with a few other people, right? And so, like, if you assume it's this fascinating, like, modern social structure where, like, you're admitting to having a problem, and in exchange for admitting you have a problem, we're granting you anonymity to work through that problem. And in this social space with other people, well, they're applying that whole idea to VR, where you don't even have to show up with your actual face. You don't have to give up that first piece of anonymity in order to, like, be drawn into these groups that maybe take you offline, because this is in some ways similar to the pathway here is somewhat similar to, I don't know, dating or any other social networks you would have online. Maybe it starts in VR, but over time you gotta connect with people outside of headset or in other venues and grow what you sort of sparked in VR. But just fascinating to kind of confirm or hear that these things are happening basically every day of the week. And I tried to approach this article very carefully, where I didn't even name the source who brought this schedule to me. And I didn't even link to the individual spaces. I went to one of the spaces myself. I looked around at all the literature they had to explain how these things work, the meetings. And I chose not to link to them because I didn't. The person who toured me through this described an AA meeting, an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, where one of the people at the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting had to chase around a kid running around the space who was trolling them. And they were running around trying to do the ban button or mute button or whatever to click on that person's head at an AA meeting, right? And this is funny. This is silly that this actually happened. But it's at the same time, like, what better target for the 12-year-olds to go have a silly, excursion than to go mess with the drunks, right? Like, you could literally have that as a thing you could do in VR really easily. So, like, this is the reality of virtual reality. Wow. To think of that being what Horizon is and wants to be. And I don't know, people are dealing with it, right? Like, they're dealing with going and trying to ban that person and trying to build up a community around this very serious, like, lives could be ruined if the anonymity veil here is breached by anyone. And like, how do we respect the desire all the way down of these people to remain anonymous? Anyways, fascinating to confirm, and I know there's a lot of other groups in VR. I put a call out on this article that if you've been helped in VR by, like, a group like this, leave a comment. I want it to be so entirely voluntary here for you to share how you've been helped by virtual reality, how you've been helped by socialization in virtual reality. Any interesting comments out there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to break down there. So I think this kind of meetup is where social VR really shines, where there's a community organized around a specific interest, be that, something very happy or something more somber like Alcoholics Anonymous. And you do also have to have a way of moderating and gatekeeping these communities. You have to have a way of kind of having a filtering process. You don't get the 12-year-olds kind of trolling it, but as Jack B pointed out, AA actually has this problem on Zoom as well. It's not unique to virtual reality. Any online space that you can join, there's going to be trolls that join it. And the way to solve that is to have the right moderation tools that give the right power and the right kind of ability to quickly get these people out. You shouldn't have to chase them down, right? You should easily be able to, pull up a list of people or change into a god's eye view of a miniature version of the space and easily kind of pluck them out. These are solvable engineering problems over time. So I think the other thing is anonymity, because I think this is a great example of why it is important to uphold anonymity online, as well as other examples, like, as commenters in the past have brought up, Journalists need to be able to be anonymous, especially when they're coming from countries with oppressive regimes. And the reason I bring this up is because there is a clamor by certain people to end anonymity online. It is this kind of layman's armchair quarterback solution to all of the problems that you see in social media. Oh, just end anonymity. And it's very popular in Europe, for example, this kind of political clamor for, well, we'll solve all of the problems of the internet by just making it so you have to sign up with an ID card and use your real name. And quite quickly, as well as the many other problems there involved in kind of government censorship and power and overreach, you realize, and general privacy and security and data leaks, you realize that there are very genuine and important use cases for anonymity in the digital world that need to be upheld. And I think this is a great example of that.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of discussion about the faith-based sort of terminology that's associated with AA and it being a huge sort of difficulty for a bunch of people to overcome. But I like Jack's comment here, very interesting here. The flip side of the coin, AA pun intended, is that the anonymity is also the cause of the bad behavior. Right. The flip side of what we are discussing right now is there is a small but growing and vibrant even subculture of people who their weekends from Saturday night to Sunday night, their bar crawl equivalent is to go VR chat world hopping with a group of friends, 5 to 10 friends, right? And drinking the whole time, getting blackout drunk, right? So that activity is also happening in VR, parallel to what you're saying here, Jack. So like, how do you change the flow of AA so you funnel more people into recovery and to the change that they're seeking in their life without people showing up to the AA meetings in VR drunk off their ass because they didn't have to get into a car to get there, right?
Yeah, I see another comment here from I Love UEVR saying that they love the idea of support groups in VR chat, but they would be too distracted by furries, Kermit the Frog, outfits and whatnot. And so that kind of brings up one of arguably the advantages of Horizon Worlds, which is actually why people used AltSpace VR before it instead of VR chat sometimes, which is that you do have this kind of guarantee of generally PG, generally humanoid avatars, whereas the kind of freedom of VR chat, at least when the 12-year-old is trolling you in Horizon Worlds, they're not appearing as like Pepe the Frog or something like that. That at least there's a basic humanoid form there in some way. But I do think it's great to point out, by the way, that yes, there is a big issue with alcoholism on VR chat. It is. I saw some of the commenters point this out at the very start of the discussion. It is not exactly a secret. It's an open knowledge that there are, as you say, communities where people get very, very drunk. And so that kind of is the dichotomy here and it kind of comes down to how technology can be used for good or bad, right? The anonymity of this tech can be used to get blackout drunk and, be irresponsible, or it can be used to meet up with people and maybe you didn't have the courage, for lack of a better term, to do it in physical reality.
And we break our brains, right? You got to. This is why VR is this is why David and I have trouble sleeping sometimes. Why we're kept awake to report the news to you at all hours. Please, let me take this time to make the pitch to become a member at UploadVR.com or a patron and support our work and try to help us have these conversations, right? What David just described, right, getting blackout drunk in VR chat is an ill, like a societal ill that is happening. It's something that is going to continue to happen. But like the person goes and gets blackout drunk and passes out on their bed instead of on a highway and crashing into a family of 4. And we have to talk about these differences in how humans are relating to one another holistically, considering all the differences that are at play, and trying to shift it towards like, oh, how do we help the person who's clearly needs to get out of the cycle that they're doing every single weekend, while acknowledging, hey, maybe that's better than driving while drunk, right?
Yeah, I mean, this argument kind of came up as well in the 90s when there was this massive political clamor to ban violence in video games. And in reality, when the studies were done on this, when the multi-year longitudinal studies were done, it turned out that it appears that by getting their aggression out on virtual characters in video games, a lot of violent people who otherwise would have gone on to commit crimes actually were able to find an outlet for that. So there is an interesting kind of parallel there where you actually saw a decline in violent crime in the 90s that one of the many possible reasons could be ascribed to video games. You know, going out and doing your rampage in Grand Theft Auto is a lot better than doing it in physical reality, of course.
Now we're at Caprica, right? That was a show that died too early. Did you watch Caprica, David?
It rings a bell to me. I feel like
Oh,
for some reason I know the name.
The Battlestar Galactica spin-off show. It was set before the fall of the Cylons attacking everyone, and the society at the peak of its height spends all their time doing horrible things in virtual reality as a playground for them. And I think that's where the robots grow up, right? All the awful things humans do to the robots in virtual reality ends up being their training ground, and why the Cylons are so darn mad at us.
Sure, I guess we should always put assuming the NPCs in your video game are not sentient qualifier in front of saying this.
All right, John Carmack now. Yeah, I'm worried about whatever John Carmack is building in a bunker somewhere, right? Like, all right, yeah, so he's doing something. All right, let's move on here. We've gotten from Alcoholics Anonymous to sentient AIs. Smart glasses are next, David?
Yeah, so the first one here is that the Oakley Meta glasses have been announced. That's our first smart glasses topic. This is interestingly, though, not the Oakley Meta glasses that we all thought were coming. We all kind of thought that there was going to be one of the more traditional Oakley designs used. Essentially, what these Oakley Meta HSTN glasses, which I'm told are pronounced like Houston glasses, are a pro version of the Ray-Ban Meta glasses with a slightly different design. So you can see I'll cycle through the different designs available here. It's not crazily dissimilar to Ray-Ban Meta, but it also is clearly a slightly different design. The difference on a technological level is mostly minimal. So on essentially, these are the same kind of product, right? It is glasses with a camera, 5 microphones, 2 speakers, and a chip on board that can do some very basic local voice commands as well as access Meta AI in the cloud. And you can use these to listen to music or audiobooks or podcasts. You can take calls on regular call or WhatsApp or Messenger or Instagram. You can do video calls on WhatsApp and Messenger and Instagram where the person on the other end sees what you're seeing through the first person camera. You can live stream. You can use it for live translation through the AI. It's the same thing as Ray-Ban Meta glasses, still no display, but the battery life is longer and the video recording resolution is higher. And it's $100 more. So it essentially just is like a slightly higher end version. Meta is kind of pitching this towards sports and athletes and saying, it's better for that. There was this massive misunderstanding going around online that these are more water resistant because Meta markets these as IPX4 water resistant, which is true. But so are the Ray-Ban Meta glasses. This is all a very interesting piece of marketing and why there's a difference between a press release and journalism. A press release will say, look at these cool glasses. They're IPX4 water resistant. A journalist will tell you, so was the previous product. But they're not saying this is newly more water. They're not even saying it's more water resistant. It's just an example of how you can deceive with marketing without actually technically telling a lie. So I think it's more to just the design here. The style is more aimed towards athletes. You could argue that the longer battery life is aimed towards athletes. Meta cites 4 hours of typical use for the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, and they cite 8 hours of typical use for the Oakley Meta HSTN glasses. Now, of course, that comes down to Meta's definition of typical use. This is a product where it's very hard to put a number on the battery life for these things because it entirely depends what you do with them. If you are literally just wearing them all day and occasionally taking a phone call or something on them, they're going to last all day, right? But if you're constantly taking photos and videos, they're going to last a couple of hours. It's entirely use case dependent, but if their kind of claim is to be believed on their typical use description, it is double the battery life. So if you are someone who was a power user of these Ray-Ban glasses and your constant thought is, damn, I just wish I had more battery life. Well, I guess Meta has a product for you. But I think, again, the real pitch here is about the different design that you might find more appealing for being on the beach or something like that.
Do they have a non-sunglasses tint version? Are there clear ones of this?
Yeah, so I'll bring up all the styles here. Yeah, they do have the kind of regular one here. They have transparent sunglasses. They have transitions lenses. I'm not sure if this is that one, but yeah, here's an example of black with purple transitions. Then they have these like clear blue things. I guess the one thing I would say about the lenses, so I said that on a tech level, it's the battery life and the video recording, which is different. It can record 3K video, whereas the Ray-Ban Meta glasses can only record 1080p. On a kind of more broad definition of what you would call tech, the lenses are also better. They have this kind of technology from Oakley that they say increases the contrast and colors of what you're seeing. So it's just like a better way to filter colors through a tinted lens that they say is going to make things clearer. So again, I think I'm definitely accurate to just describe these as Ray-Ban Meta Plus or Ray-Ban Meta Pro is essentially fundamentally what this product is.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there's an A/B test going here between the Oakley and the Xbox story that we've got later on in the show. But I'm ready to move on from this because this is not VR and I'm bored.
So there's just one thing I want to say, which is that they very carefully are not calling these Oakley Meta glasses. As I keep saying, they're Oakley Meta HSTN glasses, as you will see in the title of this video or podcast episode. But as you may know, many times on this podcast, we were talking about Bloomberg's Mark Gurman saying that Meta was going to come out with Oakley Meta glasses with a camera in the center. And notice that the camera here is still on the side. So you'll always have a little bit of an offset for first-person footage. Well, now that these are out, Gurman claims that there is, in fact, another Oakley Meta glasses product coming later this year, which will use their Sphera design. So they would be presumably called Oakley Meta Sphera glasses, and they would have this kind of traditional Oakley form factor and have a camera in the center.
Yeah, so, I'm sure Zuckerberg's going to look real cool in that one.
Yeah, they need to stop using Mark Zuckerberg as a fashion model. Just before we move off this, the only color I didn't show on screen there, by the way, is the limited edition that they're putting out first. Weirdly, the limited edition will be available first. This thing on screen now with the gold tint, and then the general product later in the summer. So, yeah, I agree with you. This is, if you're interested in VR and AR, this is relatively boring. These are not AR, they're not VR, but they are a rapidly growing tech. And the reason that we follow this is because it's quite clear that over time, gradually, these kinds of glasses are going to evolve into AR glasses very gradually and very slowly over the course of a decade or more.
Sorry, I'm turning into the alien from The Thing when you say that. All right. Yeah, all right. Let's talk about F1 the movie because I want to talk about this Xbox. Darn it. You've got the Snap Spectacles. I missed that one. Darn.
Well, you've jumped 3 topics ahead.
Jeez. Okay. Yeah. No, there's a whole list. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So staying on smart glasses, unfortunately, for people who aren't interested in talking about that, Google is reportedly investing $100 million in Gentle Monster. So if you remember at I/O, Google said that it is working with these two companies on essentially a Ray-Ban Meta competitor. So Google is coming into the space. They want to have the same thing, but you're using Gemini instead of Meta AI. And so they're working with these two companies at first. EssilorLuxottica, the company that Meta has a big partnership with, it has a partnership well into the 2030s. EssilorLuxottica owns Ray-Ban, it owns Oakley. It also does the glasses for Prada, which we discussed last week. But Google has essentially decided to go and find all of its competitors, EssilorLuxottica's competitors, and partner up with them. So EssilorLuxottica is a massive company. They have like almost a global monopoly, but there are alternatives, and Google is essentially saying we're going to go to them. Gentle Monster in particular is interesting because it's quite popular with Gen Z, and you have some big celebrities like I think Billie Eilish and either Rihanna or Beyonce or both. Doesn't matter exactly who. The point is, it's rising in popularity. Gen Z like these glasses. There are big celebrities wearing them. So Google wants to have presumably gentle monster Gemini glasses or whatever they would be called. We'll see what the product ends up being. One thing I just want to note is that we don't expect those first glasses to have the heads-up display that Google kept showing. They very carefully put in the small print of Google I/O that the actual shipping products would have an optional display, or sorry, to be clear, it would be optional for a shipping product company to actually use the display. So I think just like with the Ray-Ban and Oakley glasses, we're going to see this tier of displayless smart glasses exist first. But let's indeed move on to talk about the Snap Spectacles. Full AR glasses development kit. It's available for $99 a month for developers to rent. It's very bulky. The field of view is only 46 degrees, which is pretty much par for the course for transparent AR optics, but terrible compared to VR optics, because even that 46 that these companies say, that's diagonal. And if you're talking about the diagonal field of view of your Quest headset, it's like 110, 120, 130, depending on exactly where you measure it on the lens. So that's just context on what this is. The story we have here is that a developer has been playing around with this. The developer that's rented these for $99 a month to build a cool little real-world ad blocker experiment. I want to be clear that this is an experiment. It's not a practical thing you would wear to go around and block ads in the world. This is just a developer playing around with the tools. Specifically, they're playing around with the new kind of depth API on Snap OS that lets you cache the depth position of frames. Then they send it off to Gemini, Google's Gemini, and say, where in the frame is there an ad? Give me the coordinates. Then they bring those coordinates back and just put a red kind of rectangle in the way. Now, as we point out in our article on this, while the software here is sound, right? There's nothing, it's going to be expensive to constantly query Gemini like this, but in theory, it's fine. And over time, you could have an on-device model that does this. The real issue is that with transparent AR optics, one, they can't render full opacity. So you're going to actually still see the ad behind it, as you can clearly see here. Problem two is that the field of view is so limited on these transparent AR display systems that you'll only have the ad blocked when you're looking at it. So if you're actually looking over here, or down here, the ad will still be there in your peripheral vision. It'll only be when you directly look at it. So it's a cute little experiment. It's really cool. It raises questions about, would platform holders actually allow this on shipping products, right? Would there be kind of some sort of, cease and desist, you're against our terms of service condition, or would they actually be able to do this? That'll be interesting to see once we do have AR glasses. And just for the final context here, if you missed it earlier in the month, Snap has said that they will be shipping consumer AR glasses next year, and it will run the same apps. So theoretically, you will be able to buy your Snap AR glasses in 2026 and run this ad blocker with all the massive caveats that I've just pointed out.
Man, I'm gonna do war on everyone here because of the terminology battle here. And so I encourage you to go read David's article on this, where he carefully pointed out the difference optically between VR headsets passing through AR and AR glasses that can't properly, kind of like, it's almost like an ad highlighter. This is almost an ad highlighter to me. Right, not an ad blocker. This is to point out the ads to you a little bit more clearly everywhere you see them. And the thing that's silly here is an Apple Vision Pro right now walking down the street could do this perfectly with the right, like you said, it could be expensive. I'm put up a battery pack over here on my side so that it can query and do that constantly, and I've got my iPhone over here so it can constantly do the internet connection with my cell phone. Then I'm walking down the street and I look over here, and instead of a slightly highlighted box, I see a smiling happy person going like this at me, right? Like my kids are waving at me from the pictures instead of this badly highlighted ad. And you started saying AR glasses, and I got to go back to the last Oakley thing. What is it? Where are the glasses? Where's the system that is opaque, pure VR at 100 degrees with open periphery? Where is that? Which design of the ones we talk about day in and day out is doing that?
So that's what we expect Meta's headset next year to be. But hold on, you brought up a whole bunch of cans of worms, so let's go at them one by one. Firstly, James O'Loughlin in the comments always loves to point out that Magic Leap 2 is a transparent AR system that has a slightly wider field of view, 70 diagonal, and can do segmented dimming. And you're right to point that out. The problem is it's like about 3 times heavier than you'd want actual glasses to be. Magic Leap 2 is not a glasses, it's a headset. It has this really thick and relatively heavy optical system to allow this to happen that you're not going to put into a regular pair of eyeglasses. So sure, okay, interesting to point out. The other issue is this segmented dimming. You're not just dimming the area, you're dimming the entire kind of everything there. So you would actually dim parts outside the ad. And that's the thing, right? Even with glasses that you have global dimming, like Snap spectacles, you can make the whole image darker to make things more opaque. Same thing with X-ray glasses. You can make the whole image darker. And these are optical systems that you can fit in to a pair of actual glasses. But then everything else gets dark as well. And so, Ian, you're also right to point out on the other side that you can get an Apple Vision Pro style headset and walk down the street and have this done perfectly. But then today you're wearing 600 grams on your face and you don't have your periphery blocked out. The pass-through has motion blur, so you're actually limiting yourself. The vertical field of view is so bad that you can't see your own feet walking, so you're going to trip over stuff. Neither of these technologies are appropriate for walking down the street. And I hate to invoke the VR download drinking game, but it's happening. We're bringing up the Abrash pick.
Oh wait, they know where to go after this, don't they? Right? Do you know?
Terrible joke.
Sorry.
But yes, but look, the reality is that today this part is too bulky to wear down the street and not water resistant. So in any country where it might rain, you're screwed. You're going to end up either you're destroying your multi-$1,000 headset because a bit of rain happened, which maybe doesn't happen in California, but in the UK, it legitimately can just randomly start raining at any time. It's not a meme. We're not making it up. It does just happen. So that's not practical for a lot of people. Then this one here doesn't exist, right? There is no actual pair of glasses and glasses form factor that you can go and buy that is doing real AR. Technically, you can get some of these Chinese ones that have like a 23-degree field of view and the worst processor ever. So everything is horrendously like 3 frames per second. But in terms of practically like an actual product that you would want to buy, this doesn't exist, right? There is no system that you can walk down the street. You can rent the Snap specs, right? Like we've just been showing, but I wouldn't really call this glasses form factor either. It's 200 and something grams like Magic Leap 2. And you could argue that these are glasses, but in practicality, you pick it up and it feels more like a headset. So that's the problem that we are today. For actually doing any of these AR things in the real world as you walk down the street. The headsets are too bulky and the glasses don't exist. But what will happen in coming years, right? We expect next year that we will get VR-style display systems with pass-through, potentially, that are much, much lighter, but using a tethered compute puck. For some people, that's fine. Some people put their tethered headphones in still, and some people didn't mind the snagging of the cable with their iPod back in the day. Other people would probably never go back to that. The other issue is you're still going to run into issues around pass-through quality. You're still running into the fact that these devices probably aren't water resistant. There are other kind of odd practicalities there. I still think even in the design, if it's going to be a lot slimmer, it's not going to look like glasses. So it's going to be not particularly socially acceptable. Maybe you don't care about that. Okay. Most people do.
So,
and then just to be clear, to finish this up, on the other end, we're going to see the first AR glasses arrive, but they're going to be limited field of view. They're going to be somewhere between 50 and 60, probably field of view, the first generation of glasses from Snap and Meta. And they're going to have, limited compute and still this limited opacity problem where either you dim the entire display in what can fit into glasses form factor, James. Yes, the bulky big Magic Leap that's $3,000 can do segmented dimming. But in terms of what you can fit into actual sunglasses looking things, you either dim the entire display to do more opaque or you make it brighter and more clear of the real world. So it's kind of the irony of see-through AR is that it's less see-through than pass-through, right? You get a brighter image in pass-through, even though it's lower quality and greener.
Yeah. So what's what I said before about Apple Vision Pro technically being able to do this today. The exception there is you would have to go download the ad blocker app from the App Store. That's specifically
yeah, and you wouldn't run because you don't have camera pass-through access on Vision Pro at all.
okay.
Yeah.
So where I was going with this is like you can't whatever this dream feature that we talk about, an ad blocker, can only be provided by the operating system, only by like the platform, the provider, I think, can do it. Otherwise, you like, how does multitasking work? How do you run like 3 services analyzing your environment all at once for various purposes? I don't see that architecture following. It's like Apple Google
Yeah.
and the analysis of your environment so that other developers can't abuse that system.
It's a super interesting point.
But yeah, and so following on from that, you go to the situation where, to your point, that let's imagine that feature was there, that a developer could release an ad block app with the camera access on Apple Vision Pro. That's incredibly inconvenient, right? To go open the ad block app in order to not see ads on the street. It would have to be an augmentation feature provided by the headset itself.
Well, no, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. You can imagine an app architecture in the same way that Apple's just released widgets as a new kind of app, and the same way volumes were introduced as a new kind of app with Vision OS 1. You could imagine something called like ambient apps. Okay, we come out one day, it's Vision OS 30 or whatever, 29, whatever it happens to be, and Apple says, we're introducing a new type of apps called ambient apps. Ambient apps always run in the background and augment your environment no matter where you are. That's something that can happen, and it would still run through the same shared space reality kit. It would leverage these system APIs so that it's not, running a full-fledged game engine or something like that. It's running efficient code. It makes much more sense for a glasses OS than it does for Vision OS that's for a headset, but I don't see why you wouldn't have it on both eventually. That's a solvable software architecture problem. I think that's solvable. It's the bigger issues around the hardware.
Well, yeah, and the thing that we always fight, or it is the UploadVR drinking game, is right. Where is, in addition to the other system what did you say? Who did you say was building that? You think that's next year's meta system, the Puffin? It would be nice, small, super. It's basically got the glasses form factor out of the optics with a tethered puck. What's breaking my brain is you showed me all these Oakleys, right? And it feels like all of them need a USB-C port out the back in order for you to go and, I don't know, get your 4-hour, you're on a ski-doo for 3 hours out in a lake. You want battery that's going to last you 3 hours of filming everything you're doing out there on the lake. And you do that with a USB-C port out the back of your glasses, which all of these things aren't designed to do, yet the VR headsets and Puffin architectures are designed to just let you go as long as you possibly want.
So to be clear, Snap Spectacles dev kit does have this. We don't know if it'll be in the consumer version, but there is a USB-C port on the back of this thing. This thing is often ridiculed for having its 30 to 45 minute battery life. But in reality, if you are a power user, you do just plug it into a power bank with the USB-C. And I'm sure it would be interesting for sure to be able to have that on Ray-Ban or Oakley glasses. I'm sure it is something they're looking at for Pro products. And yeah, it's an interesting feature request. LL is saying, like, in real life, an ad blocker seems more like a novelty. To be clear, our discussion here isn't really about, like, is this the most useful thing in the world? It's more, when can we do real world augmentation like this? You can imagine a bunch of different use cases for what this kind of ambient AR apps we just talked about, where without having to have a specific app open, an app is able to use a little slice of compute, maybe every couple of frames or whatever, to run an efficient on-device computer vision model, or to reach out to the cloud to run a cloud model. There are a bunch of privacy concerns around this, but you could say the same thing about the pass-through camera access that was just announced. And the irony about that is, you could do this with Quest 3 today. Someone could build this exact app on Quest 3 and walk down the street and have this work perfectly, as you say. And I see some commenters pointing out that the open periphery thing can be solved today with open periphery head straps for Vision Pro and Quest 3. Absolutely. So that is the case. And we expect that headsets over time, open periphery will be the default. And I've said this before, it's unlikely that any headset that does not have a by default open periphery design will ever go mainstream for a bunch of practical reasons. And your side blockers would be something you attach in on purpose when you want to get more immersion. Biggs pointing out you could do stuff like mute or block IRL people too. Yep, you could do the black mirror thing. So
Yeah,
through your transparent AR glasses, you would still see them through it. But yeah,
it's just, it doesn't work for me. And what kills me? All right, so Peridot is this cool little pet experience, right? But the question is, what do you want to do with your pet, right? Like Peridot has a weird, like, you're breeding the pets. That's like you're making new ones is what you do in that game, and you try to get a genetically unique one, which is kind of just a weird, like that's their game loop in the Peridot game. But what I explained, or how I think of it, is I want Lassie. I want Lassie from that old TV show from the 1950s, a little helpful pet on the ground that I can look at and like understands English when I talk to them. Maybe can't speak English, but certainly understands my English when I'm speaking to it. And I want to send it off to go and do things for me in these AR glasses. But what you talked about, real world augmentation, and it drives me nuts. Where like laser tag, paintball, two things where like I could actually want to go and do that with a team of 20 people. I would actually want to go find a field with 20 people and say, let's go have paintball in this field. We're all going to wear 20 VR headsets and we're going to do that scene from the end of Ready Player One where we're all running at each other and where everything is synced up and it's working all beautifully. What drives me nuts on this, David, is like I see VR getting to enable that. It all feels like solvable software problems from here, with slow, steady steps improving the hardware to pull out the periphery for us to see everything out there, to bring the weight down on our heads. And then we've got that dream scenario I just outlined of 20 people in a field playing paintball. And it's not this other design that we're talking about because of the problems.
Well, as long as the field has a rain shield in any country where I can start raining, I keep bringing it up, but it is a practical problem. The other problem in countries where it's very sunny is heat. The thermals are going to be tough, but that's going to be the same between these both architectures. In fact, it'll be a lot worse on the glasses.
I'm ready for a neck fan to offset.
No, I mean the device itself. It's not going to help the chip inside to put a fan on your neck. I'm talking about the chip itself.
Can I water cool up to the headset from my neck fan, David?
A water-cooled headset would certainly be interesting. I wonder how that would work as you're sloshing your head around and whether that could work well. I think the thermals are going to be a huge issue for any outdoor AR of any kind. I think all these companies have said this, right? Meta has said, what's the biggest issue in actually shipping sci-fi AR glasses? And Andrew Bosworth has said, and I think Michael Abrash has even said on occasion, it's the damn thermals. As I'm sure you've encountered, your Ray-Ban Meta glasses will even overheat today, and they don't have a display. They're not doing 6-DoF tracking. They're literally just taking in audio and a camera frame and outputting audio or recording a video. It's I think you're going to want to have the experience you described being indoors in an air-conditioned environment.
Oh yeah, I was trying to stretch VR to fit the use case that we imagine AR to be, and it's not going to happen, right? And that's where I'm going of just all these. So I saw someone earlier in the thing calling the Oakley glass of devices e-waste, and it's a little harsh, but here's the thing that's frustrating: if you make low quality, like minimum viable products, if that's like your MO, like we've got to ship to everyone with the minimum viable thing, you tend to I think you end up having this thing where like people really love it for a little while and then it starts to wear out in little ways that are really frustrating or the example in my head right now is the lenses on a camera. The moment that the lenses on a camera start scuffing, I stop taking pictures at the same rate that I used to take pictures when the pictures were new and as glorious as they were on day one. I think
Sure. And what's
it's
the
to
analogy
smart glasses. Okay.
but what's the specific analogy to smart glasses?
I stopped using a core function of my phone over time because the quality of the feature decreases through my use of it. The camera scuffs. The same scuffing will happen to camera glasses. You will stop taking pictures over time because the pictures won't look as good 1 year into owning the glasses. The battery will also not record as long because the battery has run down. My point is let's take a step back, okay? I went into a physical location last night with a $3,500 face computer. And I said, I need to fix this crack on this device. And they said, we're going to have to take it out of your hands and send it away to our factory and bring it back to you in 2 days' time. At the one Apple store in the world that I know of that's open 24 hours a day that I could get this service from. My point is that Meta has to climb that, has to learn how to make personal computers that can be repaired more quickly and more efficiently than Apple is doing on its first generation $3,500. Like how do I get my Meta computer fixed so that I can keep working in my Meta computer 3 to 5 years from now? It doesn't compute for me how Meta gets there to provide these personal computers that can get repaired and do the things I need them to do.
Sure. I agree that the retail strategy Apple has is very valuable, especially when it comes to the headsets. Just to push back on the phone thing, though, in 20 years of owning smartphones, I have never scuffed my lens once, and I can use the same phone for a long time. In a year and a half of owning the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, I haven't scuffed the lenses. They're quite a resilient device. I've taken them to the beach. I've been in the ocean swimming with them and splashed them with water. They are the good thing about designing a compact device like that with water and dust resistance is that you actually do have more resilience. And so like a Quest headset is actually more likely to be damaged over time than something like Ray-Ban Meta. When it comes to this like e-waste thing, sure, eventually on the scale of like 5 to 10 years, the batteries in these things are non-replaceable. So they're going to be e-waste, but the batteries on this, you could apply that same argument to AirPods. You could apply that same argument to Apple Watches. A lot of devices that exist today have these fixed, glued in batteries that are not replaceable. We stopped making smartphone batteries replaceable, 15 years, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and Apple never did, as far as I can remember. I don't think the iPhone ever allowed you to detach the battery. But when it comes to are these things being used, like in terms of what people normally say about e-waste, I just want to point out for balance that both Meta and EssilorLuxottica claim that they're seeing retention increase over time. And it's why you're seeing such a focus of putting out products. And there was an interesting thing in an article, I think it was from The Verge, about these Oakley glasses, which was that Meta's original plan was that the Ray-Ban Meta glasses would be their last ever glasses without a display. And according to Alex Heath of The Verge, they've actually been so successful from both the sales and retention point of view that they've started to launch more, and they're going to have a whole swathe of these displayless smart glasses. So I understand that for some people, certainly they don't want to use them. But if you look at the sales momentum, at the retention here, it does seem to be a valid category. And Mark Zuckerberg has spoken multiple times about how even when there are full-fledged AR glasses, there will still be this cheaper tier of displayless smart glasses that people use, especially since, when they run out of battery, they're still sunglasses. Here's the thing of why I'd argue they're not e-waste. What happens if your Ray-Ban Meta glasses completely die and they are dead, right? So somehow you've just been unlucky, like you could be with any tech device you buy, and say for whatever reason you can't get warranty, you've moved to some country that doesn't have warranty or whatever. They're sunglasses. They're still a great pair of sunglasses. That's the thing that I think actually needs to be realized. Whereas your AirPods or your Apple Watch, they don't have a passive usefulness, which is interesting to think. I think you're muted, Ian.
Could we perhaps do the Quest 3S next, and then you finish with the immersive video stuff without me?
Sure. You have the cutoff in 10 minutes, don't you?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking to make.
Sure. Okay. Let's get on to that. So, if you've been living under a virtual rock, you may not have realized that there is now a Meta Quest 3S Xbox Edition, or should we say limited edition. The Meta Quest 3S Xbox Edition is available in limited stock, and Meta claims that once it's gone, it's gone. What exactly is this? There's been a lot of speculation before it launched about what it might be, but to be crystal clear, this is just, and I say just because I'm just describing what it technically is, a Quest 3S with a black color design with a pre-installed Elite strap and an Xbox controller in the box, as well as 3 months of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. There is nothing from a hardware or like core software perspective that's that different. They do have the setup tweaked a little bit so that once you finish the setup, you get booted straight into Xbox Cloud Gaming. Other than that, this is not, an Xbox headset. It's not being, made by Microsoft with some Microsoft tech inside. It does not connect to your Xbox console. It's designed, or I guess marketed would be the better word, to be used for Xbox gaming, which is a feature that has existed on Quest for years now. It's not only different is that it is the X and it comes Game Pass Ultimate in the box.
Yeah, I love that our commenters have immediately gone all over the board on their feelings about this. What is it? Big saying, if I didn't have a Quest 3, I'd buy that Xbox edition for HMD shelf novelty alone. That's the guilt I experienced, and I bought it as well. I almost wonder that the marketing. James and I were discussing this when they made the line of when they're gone, they're gone. I almost wonder if that's like an effort to try to clear these out.
Oh yeah,
because what happens if they don't clear them out, right? Like then you're now the limited edition is $300, right? Like that's not a good look.
Yeah, I guess we should say the pricing is just context there. Yeah, this is $400, which is $100 more than the Quest 3S. But interestingly, it's actually $100 less than if you were to buy a Quest 3S, an official Elite strap, an Xbox gamepad, and 3 months of Game Pass Ultimate. So in terms of what you get, it actually is saving you money if you were going to get all that anyway. That's always the massive caveat when you say that. But yeah, so now that we have the kind of context in there, you have bought one, Ian, just to confirm? You have purchased one?
It's on its way. Yeah, I'm waiting, and I feel horrible about it. I feel I needed to have it in my collection, and I feel awful.
If this was the Quest 3, I would have bought this in the first second. As the Quest 3S, I'm not interested. I have no interest in buying a Fresnel lens headset in 2025. I think it's incredibly disappointing that people are going to put this thing on and think that this is where VR is. I want to just remind,
it'll feel so ancient, right? In 12, that's what I was struggling with, right? How ancient will this feel in about a year, right?
Yeah, the lenses in this are the same lenses that were introduced in Oculus Go. Oculus Go, for a little bit of background context, was supposed to come out in 2017. It came out in 2018. But the lenses were ready. Okay, the lenses were ready to ship in 2017, and here they are in an Xbox branded product in 2025. I understand why, pancake lenses are more expensive. Disappointing, especially for virtual screens, because right now I'm in a Quest 3S. Okay, and when I want to look at a different part of this tablet, I rotate my head. Whereas when I come in here on a Quest 3, I can rotate my eyes. So I can look with my eyes on the Quest 3 pancake lenses, whereas because of the edge blur on the Fresnel lenses, I'm turning my head. And so I wonder how many people get this and think, that's so cool. It's an Xbox cloud gaming on a giant monitor, but why is it so blurry? And then think that's just VR. I guess VR is just a little bit blurry.
I love that. Well, yeah, I'm getting near the end of my time in here, and I just wanted to leave on a comment that I've been thinking about and see if I spark some thoughts out there, discussion on the fact that this came out amid reports that Xbox was due to lay off thousands of people. And this comes after Meta has laid off many thousands of people. And I'm remembering, I think a lot of people in our audience remember John Carmack's words talking about Meta potentially expending thousands of people in pursuit of building the metaverse, this weird, vague concept instead of, real value for their end users. And I really wonder about tasking your employees to use AI at these giant companies. I think there's a mistake, right? If you had a job where you didn't use AI to do your work, you were happily doing it without AI, and then your boss came along and said, "I'm sorry, we're no longer competitive as an organization. You now need to use AI to be competitive as an organization." What you're doing is you're forcing a person to use AI in a job, like for a task that they now no longer want to do, right? And I think I just wanted to like mention this in the context of thousands and thousands of layoffs at these tech companies, that maybe some of the frustration or complaining that we have, we have these people who are diehard use AI for everything, and people that are diehard like, I'm not going to use AI for anything. What if part of this conflict that we've got, that these two people aren't talking about why these things aren't working right, is if you're going to use AI, it better be for something you want to use it for. Like you want to you something new you've never done before, right? I'm going to go use AI to go do something genuinely that I has been out of my capabilities in the past. And maybe I can go find 4 or 5 other people to go team up with it. All I'm getting at is if you're at a company like Meta or Facebook or Meta or Microsoft, and you're trying to find passion in your work or making anything, and your boss has come and said, use AI or you're gone. That's not like you're not going to go and get a team together of 5 or 10 other people inside your company and make a really amazing product that surprises the higher ups, right? There's all these stories in Silicon Valley of these amazing products that only appeared precisely because of what I just described. A small team of people said, screw it, our audience needs this, we're going to go build it together. I want to know how people get together and do that at these big companies like Microsoft or Meta while they're laying off thousands of people, while they're telling all of their customers, you need to use AI because we're going to continue using AI in greater numbers. Anyways, I know it's majorly off topic from where we are, but I wanted to have that context of just, I know so many people have lost their jobs out there, are worried about losing their jobs, are blaming AI for it, while also trying to use AI at the same time to learn how they can use it. And I just wanted that context here before I headed off. I'm also probably going to be away from this show for a while. David's going to handle it without me. I'm taking a little bit of time off here in July. While I'm doing that, I just want to thank you all for your attention, your time, watching this show, spending it with David and I. The amazing conversation we have week in and week out here. Guy Godin, thank you for tuning in and giving us your virtual desktop perspective here on this show. All the regular viewers tuning in week in and week out. It's been amazing to get in and chronicle this journey with you. And I feel terrible taking this time to myself for vacation after 10 years of working at UploadVR.com without a vacation of this length, but I need it. I'm gonna step away for a little while, and I trust David and Henry and my team here to keep everything going smoothly here. That's my sign off way of saying, please become a member of UploadVR.com. Support our work. We need more people to keep covering the VR industry. And goodness, from August forward, I am going to be back at it with everyone, covering the biggest year in VR history until next year. All right, David, I'll with those last few subjects. Thank you all. I'll see you in the future.
Thanks, Ian. Enjoy your time off for sure. Yeah, so on the Microsoft layoffs thing, I certainly think some of it's definitely related to AI, but a lot of it, as some of the commenters are pointing out, is more macroeconomic and started happening before AI. There are multiple aspects here. One is that Xbox as a console has just not been competitive with Nintendo and Sony. PlayStation has eaten the kind of traditional hardcore gaming, whereas Nintendo with the Switch has eaten the kind of more casual gaming aspect, and Xbox is stuck in the middle. And now Xbox is trying to evolve to be a software platform, not a console. That's available anywhere, including now on your Quest, right? Or, well, been on your Quest for multiple years. And they have this marketing campaign. I've seen some of the commenters. If this is an Xbox, this is an Xbox. And, this is an Xbox you wear on your face, is I think the marketing for this. But amid this, so even if you talk about Xbox's weakening position relative to the other consoles, it's also the fact that attention is shifted from gaming relative to what people spend their time on. One thing that's always ignored when it comes to whether it's people reading traditional journalism less, or people going to the movies less, or people going to gaming less, it's that TikTok and Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts have taken over the world. The primary sort of growing format that people spend their time on, their attention. People only have limited time in the day. They can't be using every movie and every game and every service at the same time. They have limited hours. And what more and more people are choosing to spend their time on, for better or for worse, is TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. And all of these companies are grappling with that fact. And that has to always be taken into account when it comes to all of these kind of discussions. But the last thing I just want to say on the Quest edition is that this shows how long things take to happen in these big companies. This was announced 13 months ago. Every month since, we've seen comments, where's the Xbox Quest? Where's the Xbox Quest? And it relates to, the reason I'm bringing it up is it relates to the other Horizon OS headsets. So this isn't really another Horizon OS headset, right? It's a Quest 3S in a fancy color with some Xbox branding. But when it comes to the Asus and Lenovo headsets, they were announced at the same time, and they're entirely new headsets. They really are new headsets. So that's the kind of time frame you need to realize when it comes to how long it takes these big companies to execute. It's one of the biggest disadvantages of big companies over startups. Don't expect those Horizon OS headsets to pop up anytime soon, is the kind of take-home message from this. I also think this shows that we're not going to see, official VR support on Xbox. That's not what this is. It's what people assumed when they saw the title of this in leaks. But it's not what this is, and it's clear that that's not going to happen anytime soon. Microsoft doesn't see that as a priority. Meta wouldn't like it because it would step on its toes. This works perfectly for each company, because for Xbox, it's a new place for you to play their existing Xbox cloud gaming offering. For Meta, it's a new use case for people to use their Meta Quest headset for. And obviously, it's going to be a lot more appealing on slimmer and lighter puffins. It's kind of funny that we're talking about, slimmer and lighter headsets, and in 2025, Meta ships a new SKU that is using these Fresnel lenses, which results in, as you can, comically bulky design that we hoped wouldn't go away. I've been very torn about Quest 3S since it came out. I wonder. On one hand, I totally get that not everyone can afford $500 for Quest 3. So it's better that there exists a lower end option. It's better for developers, better for Meta, better for the industry, better for the people who are out there saying, look, I can't afford $500 on an entertainment device right now. $300 is my max. Even then, that's pushing it. There's a lot of people that say this, and it's completely valid, right? On the other hand, it is difficult that Fresnel lenses that I'm looking through right now are the experience of virtual reality people have in 2025, when pancake lenses are just so vastly, vastly superior. And I wonder how that affects retention. I wonder whether putting the headset on and having the idea of seeing your view of the virtual world compared to reality just be this little bit blurry on the edges. I wonder how much that affects things. And one data that I don't have that I would love to know is what is the difference in retention between the Quest 3S and the Quest 3? And that will speak to whether the Quest 3S was a good idea. I think if you look at Meta's Q1 results that we discussed when they came out, the fact that their year-over-year revenue is down, it's clear that having just cheaper hardware isn't good enough in itself. You need something a bit more than that. And I wonder if net overall it would have been better to just push the Quest 3 and bring down the price. You know, if we had a $400 128 gigabyte Quest 3 and then the $500 512 gig, would that be better than a Quest 3S, even though you miss out the $300 price point? It's a really big question. And Sao Galaxy VR bringing up the great point that the other problem is that these headsets are all sold with the flimsy strap. And so it's actually a great thing to see Meta selling a headset with a pre-installed Elite strap. In some ways, that actually may boost retention more than anything in the first place. So it's super fascinating to think. Let's talk about our final two topics, though, this immersive video stuff. So the first one is that there is an immersive preview trailer thing teaser for Apple's F1 movie. Not much to say about this. It's 3 minutes long. The first minute is just 3D video shown on a virtual monitor in front of you, where the director talks you through some of the complexities of shooting with real actors in the F1 cars. You know, Brad Pitt is really driving an F1 car around a track. It's not on a green screen. Then you go into the actual immersive experience, which lasts for 2 minutes. And while we always talk about how high quality the Apple immersive video stuff is with these, 8K per eye, 90 frames per second, HDR, 180-degree cameras with high bitrate, when it comes to this experience, this is the first time Apple has dropped down in quality. Why is that? Because they had to fit this camera right behind the side mirror of an F1 car. And it turned out you can't put a full-scale immersive video camera in there. It turns out that instead you have to put a much smaller traditional camera. So this is actually a 2D footage of a camera that only has around 140-degree field of view. And it seems to be converted using AI from 2D to 3D. And so the scale is off. To be clear, this is an example of a big proper camera that you couldn't fit on behind the rear view mirror of an F1 car. Instead, they had to use like a more traditional Canon style camera. So it's cool that you get to drive around the track for a lap with Brad Pitt. It's an interesting way to promote the movie, but that quality loss is really felt. And it doesn't really feel like you're next to Brad Pitt because of that. How do you solve the more compact designs for immersive cameras over time? One of the biggest losses in this is actually the frame rate. So the normal Apple immersive video is 90 frames per second. This clearly was not. I don't know what it is. It's hard to tell exactly. I'm not going to put a guess, but I can say it's definitely markedly below 90. And so the motion clarity, ironically, where it mattered most, right, going around a track on an F1, is lost. So it's interesting to see Apple release an immersive video that is not very high quality for once, even though I completely understand the engineering practicalities of why that was, or should I say, sorry, the filmography, cinematography practicalities of what that was. James O'Loughlin saying there was a better racing immersive video early this year with racing video going up a mountain. Yeah, on like a rally car and something like that, you can definitely make something better. But I think given the importance of this, I assume if this was the biggest priority at Apple, make a fully immersive camera rig that fits onto an F1 car and isn't going to put the driver in any danger, right? Because they obviously, if you're putting a big bulky piece of equipment, you have to figure out, well, if this flips, is this going to, fly into the driver and hurt them or something? You have to think all of that has to be thought out when you're doing a shot like this. If it was the biggest priority in the world, I'm sure they figured it out. They would have figured it out, but this was for a quick Apple immersive trailer for a movie, so it wasn't that important in this case. But it's a very interesting reminder that when it comes to immersive video shots, the practicality of where you're putting the camera is a big constraint on what you can film. Okay, our final immersive video topic is volumetric video. People are always asking for it. So this Chinese AI company called WebXR, you can go and try on your Quest headset right now, or your Apple Vision Pro, or your Pico, or your PC VR headset via Chrome. That's the beauty of WebXR. The problem on your Quest headset is that you'll find that this performs terribly. Unfortunately, it does not run very well on a Quest 3. Also, on some versions of the Horizon browser, there appear to be these like GPU artifacts. Unfortunate. If you have a PC VR setup, though, you can actually watch this using your PC, which will be a lot more high quality. On Vision Pro, it really shined as well. I tried it on Vision Pro, and it essentially is what everyone's been asking for when we always talk about 180-degree 3D video. It's immersive, but you can move your head side to side, lean in, and it's, of course, using Gaussian splatting. As I've said on this show many times, Gaussian splatting has done for real-world 3D reconstruction what large language models did for chatbots. It has made something that was impractical to ship in the past practical. It's really cool to try this. To be clear, by the way, this runs on flat screen. You can try this in your web browser, this 4D VAI experience from China. And you can watch these videos and use WASD to actually move around the scene. And you should probably just try it on your web browser if you don't have a Vision Pro, because then you're still getting the idea of the technology, even though you're not seeing it at full scale in 3D. It's fascinating to see these early experiments with using Gaussian splatting for moving scenes. Gracia does have some moving scenes already, but those were kind of like capturing a subject using a very expensive and not portable, what's called a 4D camera setup, a 4D studio, where they have like a bunch of cameras in a sphere surrounding the subject, and they're just capturing the subject. In this case, this is actually capturing the background too, at least the kind of frontal arc. And these are using traditional cameras. It's just 20 cameras, 20 digital cameras pointed at the subject. 20 is still a lot, right? We're a long way off from point and shoot on a handheld device, or setting up one tripod and capturing volumetric video. But like, this works. These are 10-second clips. They work. It's incredible. It's being demonstrated that we now can pull off, using the latest advancements in AI with Gaussian splatting, volumetric immersive video. There is still quite a big data requirement. You're still talking like 12.5 megabytes for a second of footage. So on a 100 megabit connection, it would take as many seconds to download the video as the video was. So if you wanted to watch a 1 minute volumetric video like this, it would take a minute to download it if you had a 100 megabit connection. Now divide that by 10 if you have a gigabit connection, of course, right? But let's just say 100 megabits is like an average of developed countries, roughly or so. Maybe it's more in some countries, but essentially you can see that we still need better data efficiency, right? You don't want it to take an hour to download an hour of footage. There's issues about like, can you stream this? It's not as if you can currently, with the way the technology is designed, kind of just download a second at a time. The data that you're downloading kind of encapsulates the whole scene and the motion over time. Michael Grant is asking, where is this again? Missed where you said to find this. It's 4D VAI, but you can go to UploadVR.com right now, and you'll see the article on this with this same image. We have the link near the bottom of the article to try this out. You can try it in your web browser right now at this very second, and you will see the magic. So what this tells me is that we're not decades off immersive volumetric video. It is a real solvable engineering problem that breakthroughs in AI are solving. This was my favorite scene here because it demonstrated a lot of immersive videos I've tried before are of like these little concert experiences, and it does suck, right? It is a fundamental problem with the 180-degree video today, traditional 3D immersive video, that when I move my head like this, the entire world moves with me. I'm not really sitting there. With this, I am. Now, the big caveat, of course, is that the further you go away from the overlap of the camera, so this kind of central region here, the more artifacts you'll see. So you can kind of see at the bottom of this image the strange artifacts, these kind of almost dreamlike, almost like you're painting on a canvas, these streaks of the scene that kind of emanate out from the periphery the further you get from the central light region. And even on people's faces and bodies, you'll see minor distortion. as if, again, like in some sort of strange dream. It's difficult to explain this, so I really recommend, again, anyone who's watching this, if you have a web browser, which you probably do if you're watching this, open it now and go and try this demo. You need to try it to understand what I'm saying. But it's clear here that there's a path. If you're just sitting watching like you would for an immersive video, I was watching this concert, and again, this is just a 5-second looping clip. Okay, it's nothing production ready. This is a glimpse of the future. But I'm actually moving my head like this. I'm leaning in, and I'm seeing the scene as it should be. It's a real volumetric moving scene. Really, really tantalizing. This is how we want all of these live sports experiences, these concerts to work. I want to be able to attend a concert or even a comedian, an open mic night, as if I'm sitting right there using this tech. Of course, when it comes to doing things live, that's not practical yet at all. Let's be clear. Gracia's moving scenes from last year took 6 minutes to train a frame. So train is like the neural equivalent of render. 6 minutes to render a single frame for Gracias. This is 30 times faster, but that still means that it takes 6 minutes to render a second at 30 frames per second. Okay, so this requires taking in a lot of data from a camera array of 20 cameras, processing it on a cloud GPU for a long time, right? And then it's ready to go. But what we're going to see over time is each year this is going to get more efficient. The amount of data needed is going to get lower, so you can download it quicker. The amount of processing time on GPUs is going to get better. The rapid advancements in AI are astonishing. And this same technology, Gaussian splatting, it's how Apple just pulled off their Vision OS 26 avatars. It's one of the technology Meta is now exploring for their codec avatars to pull it off. I want to re-highlight what I said again. For all kinds of 3D reconstruction, when you're trying to show whether it be a still scene or a moving object, something from the real world, photorealistically in VR, Gaussian splatting is, for lack of a better word, it's a golden bullet, right? It's a golden ticket. It's just like if you were a company that wanted to really make a chatbot before LLMs, you would have been sitting there kicking the wall going, damn, I can't do it. The technology today just doesn't exist. In fact, Meta did. Nobody remembers this, but Meta launched chatbots years before LLMs, and they sucked so bad that they had to cancel the whole thing and bring it offline. There was no suitable technology to ship a real chatbot that worked in the real world before LLMs. Now there is. Same thing with Gaussian splatting. You know, if we talk about just like, there were demos of volumetric videos before, let's be clear, but they took orders of magnitude more data, per second. They took much more cameras. They required all kinds of manual polishing. Same thing with static scenes, right? Photogrammetry exists. A lot of people, when we talk about Gaussian splats, even for static scenes like Vario Teleport or Niantic Scaniverse, will point out, sure, you could do this with photogrammetry before, but it was a manual process that needed a lot more data, and it wasn't as robust to things like changes in lighting. The magic of this is that it sort of, with a few caveats, just works. Theoretically, you just stick the 20 cameras there, you process the footage on a cloud GPU, and you get this 4-dimensional, as they call it, it's 3D plus time scene, a moving volumetric video. But Chrome Colossus points out rightly, it's easy to forget how early we are in immersive and how immersive VR will get in the next decade. We're absolutely early on this. We're going to see products arrive with this sort of tech soon in the coming years, but it will be until the 2030s, until this is super practical, until you can just easily capture as a consumer or a prosumer or even a kind of lone professional volumetric video and share it all over the world. We're just at the point where that's actually now practical for even, regular 3DOF 180 3D video. And Crispy has said it's felt like the early days of VR for the past 8 years. And yeah, it is. It still is. This is a multi-decade journey in the same way that personal computers were. And if you had just joined PCs in the 1970s and then you got into the 80s, you would think, damn, it's felt like we've been in the early days for so long. But the 90s still had to come along, right? With Windows 95 and iMac and the internet and the World Wide Web and all of that. And then even after that, the 2000s had to come along, where you start to see solid state storage and LCD displays, and you start the decade with these chunky laptops and end with the MacBook Air, and you start with your PDAs and your Newtons, and you end with what was the last iPhone by the end of the decade? Either the iPhone 3GS or the iPhone 4. Like those kind of things are going to happen. We really, Chrome Colossus points out, it was even earlier days 8 years ago. Yeah, it is, but we still are in the early days. Everyone who's following UploadVR, who's watching VR download, who's staying up to date with this technology, you're watching all of the fundamental technologies that are going to be a part of this thing, this medium, this new paradigm. You're watching them come into being. Just like back then, you would have watched the graphical interfaces emerge, and the standards around how do you stream pictures over the web, and JPEG and MPEG and all those kind of fundamental ideas. There was a time where when to load a single image over the internet, you had to use dial-up, so you couldn't even use your telephone and watch as it came in line by line. And people talked back then about, well, one day the bandwidth is going to be good enough and the compression algorithms will be good enough that we'll be able to do moving pictures over the internet, and we'll be able to stream entire movies, and maybe we'll be able to have like real-time video calls and consumer internet connections. And then all of that did arrive. It is unfortunately just the very it's fortunate and unfortunate. It's fortunate because you all get to watch this happen and join us in this journey. We love joining you on this journey and watching all this emerge. On the other hand, it sometimes will feel frustratingly slow. You'll feel, I want this to be here now. I want to be able to, sit as if I'm in this, bar and listening to my favorite band or my favorite comedian. I want to feel like I'm there in this small, intimate space with them right now. And you can imagine, of course, a certain other industry that's going to use this technology and probably be a massive percentage of headset usage over time. But we're not going to get non-PG today, but you can imagine the obvious implications there. Yeah, so Callan Shaw in indie games bring up a counterpoint to our 3 versus 3S conversation. They're saying they just switch between the 3S and 3, and they can really only tell the difference if you look for it. The difference is not worth the price difference. Wow, that is surprising. It really does go to show that everyone's eyes are different, is all I can say about that. I go back to back from 3S to 3 all the time, and I go back to back within minutes. The difference is stark to me. You kind of get used to the Fresnel lenses, but I'm in a 3S right now, and it's just not the same clarity and sharpness. But very interesting to hear your viewpoint, because clearly for you, it's close enough that the price difference does not matter. Biggs pointing out that one of the things that I skipped in my random recap of the late 20th century technology was BBS and MUDs, yes, and IRC chats and other message boards, right? All of this had to happen step by step. Yeah, we have other people pushing back against the Callan Shaw view and saying, no, for me, Quest 3 is dramatically better. Biggs is saying Pancake will ruin me for all the other headsets. Crispy is asking, are the lenses the same as the Quest 2? Yes. The Quest 3S is literally the display and optics of Quest 2. Literally, no different. It's the exact same panel, exact same lenses, combined with the chipset and mixed reality capabilities and controllers of Quest 3. The display and optics of Quest 2, the guts from a processing perspective of Quest 3. So, yeah. Okay, this has been a great discussion. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We've been through a lot of stuff today. Please give us your viewpoints in the comments below. If you didn't have time, you couldn't join us, or if you just think of something in the shower later on or tomorrow, right? You think, oh, damn, I should have said that. Bring in the comments below. Kyle says our audio keeps breaking up. Keep in mind, check a refresh of the stream, but we're ending it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Maybe just the headset handling the heat. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you in the future. We can't wait to keep charting this journey through the foundation of an entirely new branch of technology with you all. Enjoy your weekends.